How many know what the concept of an Easter egg is? Right, well, I'm going to give you two of them. So would you please put up the first Easter egg? There are actually three presentations. I'm not going to do two of them. My team, let me give you kind of a background. I have 5 decades of experience in counterterrorism, counterespionage. I've started the master's level programs at 5 different schools, including University of Maryland, George Washington University, Townsend University, and Utica College most recently, and now Kansas State University. The reason I went down to Kansas, which is a question I get every once in a while, is that it has a laboratory for unmanned aerial systems, and as we're going to soon find out, that cybersecurity has a very big part in unmanned aerial systems. They're called SCADA systems. There's actually flying SCADA machines. And I think I'm going to attack a couple of items, but let me show you what we're going to give you as presents before a long-winded presentation. Wynn warned me about long-winded presentations. Being a professor, that's very easy to do. So the first one is 559 slides. You're not going to see that. I'm giving that to you. But it has all the details that I'm not going to give you tonight. The second one, and that is a one about sense and avoid, and the 12 major issues of risk. Part of the jobs I do with some of the companies I've owned is to develop risk relationships and risk lists for the Homeland Security on critical infrastructure. So there might be as many as 500 various attacks and required defenses on critical infrastructure, and we put them together qualitatively and quantitatively for risk. The second one, yes, I think this is it. Let me see if this is working. Hang on a minute. The first one that you're going to get free, and the links, by the way, you can stream this. This can go internet if you want. The first one I'm going to give you covers 3 areas. It covers the market. And the market, this is only about 8 months old. And the market now has changed. I saw a statistic just moments ago, well, wherever my phone is, moments ago that says the 2 interesting statistics. I came up with an estimate of about 80,000 UAVs on the market annually for commercial purposes. I'm wrong. According to the FAA, it's 406,000 since December. This was also the same report that changed the levels of which we'll get to in a minute, the level of action. The second thing is how many people actually register drones and where? Well, it turns out that statistic you heard just a moment ago, the 21 versus 400, in Kansas, nobody wants to register. They're farmers. They couldn't give a damn about registering. If you're in Philadelphia trying to work the porn business, or if you're in Arizona trying to work the drug business, by the way, drones are really good for drugs, or if you're in Syria, I don't think the Syrians right now are doing a very good job of registering their drones. All of the ISIS people here on our land are not registering drones, and I'm going to show you what they're going to do with them, and you will really not like what you see. At any rate, this particular one gives you 3 areas. Please enjoy it. It took 6 of us some long work and lots of estimate. The market for small UAVs, also the FAA, which has hired us to take a look at what regulations are needed. They have an information security group, which sucks. Frankly, it's not an information security group, it's a coffee clutch. And I've been asked to help them with information security. Well, they really don't want to address this. They're doing their very best not to address security because it's hard. And they would rather have the judicial system take its place. If the judicial system will just give us a few decisions, we'll then tell you what the security needs to be. Okay? And let me give you a perfect example of that. The Kentucky case, just recently, there were 2 others. This is where a drone went over the house of a psychiatrist. And the psychiatrist said, I have my clients come to my house. All right, he lives in a gated, secure area. He pays for that security. Remember this for a minute. So a drone comes over his house, and he says, I don't want anybody to know who my clients are. He went to court and sued. That was his first effort. They said to him, what are you suing for? The security company are using the drones, which you signed the contract for, to protect you. He says, well, I don't want my clients to be known because they're in for psychiatric care. And the answer came, are they able to drive directly into your garage and move from your garage directly? No, they park on the outskirts of the house. Then anybody could see them. Drone or no drone. He lost the case. All right? He doesn't stop there. He shoots the damn drone down the next time he sees it and gives them this excuse that his daughter happened to be seen, which you heard a little earlier. Well, the rule became interesting. The judge at that point had to go back nearly 70 years to the only known drone case at the time that said 83 feet above your house you own. Anything below, from 83 feet below, is you're protecting your property. It used to be, just until recently, 500 feet was the top end of it. The FAA, with its one set of rules, said 500 feet, it's a felony because you're shooting down a plane. Got it? So it's the wild, wild west between 500 feet and 83 feet. So you have to measure before you shoot the drone. All right? So he shot it down with a shotgun. It turns out that it was somewhere, according to the people, about 70 feet. So he got away with this, except he's liable for damages to the drone. It's a tort. But he doesn't go to jail because he didn't shoot down a plane. Well, that didn't stop our boy. The next thing he did was buy a C-41 drone killer. A drone killer, which you probably have seen, where you sit up there, shoot it down. It's basically an electrical pulse of radar energy. It's not very strong. It's about 10 kW. But guess what? It's not a gun. And because in the state he was in, they had gun laws that are oppressive, and the Second Amendment, along with the Fourth, is under attack, he was able to mention, he said, I did no harm to this property because it was, looking at my daughter again. He must have quite a daughter, but looking at my daughter again. All right? The third case is most interesting. We found out several facts. He didn't have a daughter. The second thing is an EMP gun is illegal in this state. You see where it's going to go here? The third one is it was at 89 feet. Now, how the hell they knew that between 70 and 90, unless you have some way to measure this, and I doubt if he went up there and took a ladder, and measured the thing, but somehow, using geometry, they came up with 89 to 90 feet. So now he's in the wild, wild west. But by using an unsanctioned gun, he has now committed a felony. But the drone, and he owes $40,000 for the drone. So, in 3 cases, he has established some law for us, just to show you how fun these cases can be. All right, the next one, please. Whoops, Arthur, hurry up. This one's a freebie. You have the link to it. It's approximately 347 slides. It's a lot of work, but remember, everything like information everywhere takes time and can be updated, and it's the best we could do at the time. The second one is 547. This is very new. We just finished this one. Bring it down. Oh, I can do that here. This has the, I'm sorry about the background. It looked better when we did the other one. But at any rate, you're going to be seeing in this one, SAA. The key to what I'm going to be talking about in just a minute is sense and avoid systems. Sense and avoid systems are the heart and the gut of all of your UAVs. And it's the easiest to attack. And unfortunately, fortunately, it has 5 particular areas that we're going to discuss in this one. I'm only going to take on 4. There are actually 12 issues here. I recommend you get this one. It's got a great deal of work. Lots of pictures. I'm not going to waste time with pictures, since I only am down to 25 slides in the last one. Communications area, critical control systems, navigation, payloads, intelligence, and so on. So this is the second Easter egg. Now, before we start, I need to point out a couple things.
Can you go back to the first one of it, please?
Which one are you looking for?
The first slide, next to one before it.
This is a national critical intelligence estimate. We do these on several of them. In fact, I've done them on the Iranian attacks, on Egypt, on Turkey, on the America, which was even more interesting. I haven't done one on Sweden yet. I think I'll give my students that. That could be very interesting. But anyway, we develop risk-associated issues with critical infrastructure attacks and then find the appropriate ways to defend them. In this case, this has to do with unmanned aircraft systems. All right? And the 5 critical areas around sense and avoid. I apologize for the blue screen. It worked better on ours. And this is free. You can go ahead. The only thing we ask is attribution. Give us attribution to myself and my team. All right, let's go to the new one now. I have to tell you that I am in total, and I love hunts. Wait a minute, let's put that differently. I appreciate that. Don't get, go the wrong direction there. Hans is one of the smartest people I know. At the same time, I am 150% against unmanned ground transportation. I'm betting against them big time. I got money on it. It says it's going to be a total failure. I'm usually right on some of these. I made a lot of money going against things. You're going to have great success in UAS. You're going to have even more success, but little in a limited market, but a huge money success in underwater vehicles. Rescue, I'll tell you where you're going to get them, because I went to the Navy and did this. Underwater vehicles are good for rescue. They're good for mapping conditions. They're good for what are called prepositioned material, meaning the laboratories out at sea, when a vessel goes bad, you want to have somebody close. You don't want to be calling in Coast Guard and so on. And mine laying, of course, and then you also have wire transfers and communication systems. But the one that the Navy was interested is, I sent them a proposal that I could stop Russian torpedoes using cyber technology and cyber weapons. That got them interested. Okay, and they're funding that one. They didn't fund any of the others. They fund the weapon. But I get to do all the research. The unmanned ground transportation's got a huge group of people behind it. Amazon, Google, you name them. Watch their stocks. They're going to lose their asses, or I'm going to go down and I'll lose mine. But here's why. Do you know a single human being that will allow you to take your wife in a car that has an automatic driver? Think about this for a minute. Backseat driving for women is exactly what is necessary. Backseat, what woman will trust a man driving that no longer has control of how fast he's going, what turn he's going? I got news for you. How many are married? How many have a wife saying, slow down, get in the right lane? Did you see that guy over there? Hey, wake up, man. Who are you talking to? Stop looking to the left. Drive closer. Slow down.
Drive talk.
Okay? Can't do that in UBT. Think about it for a minute. We're just not going to trust our lives to something. We don't even like flying anymore. And you have a pilot at least. So I'm not with the UGT side. Let's get started. This is only 20 slides, but they're compressed. I want to talk about the problem. And let me see if I can see this a little better so I can show it to you. The risk of success this is about UAVs, air defense systems, and down at the bottom is what I'll be going over. The risk of success of terrorist attacks against air defense systems is going up, big time. And why? Commercial UAVs. Commercial systems are much more available, much more heavy, much more intelligent, greater payloads, and the sensitive void systems for collision avoidance are quite significantly improved. Everything's better for cheaper money. You can get a commercial one now as low as $600, quadcopters and so on, all the way up to about $2,000, which is still within the range of the dollars, if you will, that are completely armed. Who? Everybody. I want to give you how we look at this thing. The Ryan-Nichols equations have been used in the Department of Defense since we created them, I don't know, at least 25 years ago. And basically what it says is that risks equals threats times vulnerabilities times impact divided by countermeasures. It's a qualitative, it's also quantitative, but most of the time qualitative, and it can be used either logarithmic or otherwise. You have legends of risk. Low, medium, high is the simplest one, of course, but there's a lot more than that. If you recognize that it's state zero, that means the time of the attack, that vulnerabilities in a system are always there. By definition, a vulnerability is a system failure or a system loss. Doesn't mean a threat will go through it. It just means it's there. So it goes out in the equation by derivatives, meaning at its state zero, at that time, the vulnerability is there or not there, it doesn't matter. Similarly, impact, like 9/11, what was the impact of 9/11? Well, before the attack, nothing. After the attack, huge, billions. But the point was, the difference was at the point of attack, it's state zero, it's zero. So you have a risk is a function of threats divided by countermeasures. That means threat goes up, risk goes up. Countermeasures go up, risk goes down. Fairly straightforward, and you can qualitatively look at it that way. That's how we look at it. In terms of setting up our list of which, 20% risk, 30% risk, 40%, and we always look in three categories: worst case, best case, probable case. This is not unheard of. So we want to look at SUAS, the small ones. We want to look at something called collaboration, which you heard a little about. We want to look about how SAA is such a key to the threat side of it. We want to expose something I call SCADA. Now, SCADA's been around since 1941, and even then before that. I think it was around when I was talking to Lincoln. And I once said somebody earlier, but they didn't know who it was. Lincoln and I were discussing this. You know. Anyway, I want you also to take a look at some of the cyber attack vectors that are available through a small UAS. And then lastly, what are our conventional types of defenses? So if you can read this, and I can too, I hope, the landscape is, we'll start off with collaboration, conventional vulnerability, automation, collaboration, conventional vulnerabilities, countermeasures, commercial UAVs, and then the SAA systems. Okay, so you heard about automation. You saw some wonderful pictures of automation and how the levels are. The first two, slave and automated, basically are available in every small UAV. You can buy them for about $600. This second one maintains orders and can receive orders, but it doesn't have a flight mission plan. Level 3 adds the navigation capability and a little bit more money, 20 grand, basically. And here are some examples: Microdome, Fly and Sense, Microcopter, and so on, the Dragonfly. What you have here is a mission plan. Remember that one, because that exists now, and when I talk about swarms in a totally different manner, you will soon see that this is a dangerous copter. Levels 4 and 5 you saw in the pictures. Basically, these are either almost fully automated or decision-making artificial intelligence. They don't exist. They exist in laboratories. At Kansas State, we do this. We also are engaged in taking down drones by a variety of methods, which we'll show you 4 of them. The point I'm trying to make is they perfectly don't exist, but there's a lot of money, as you saw in the previous thing, going into this kind of research. It won't be long. I would say we're within a 5-year planning period, and you'll see some fully automated stuff, which goes to Wynn's conversation early in the game that we need to outlaw. I don't think so. We need to change governments.
Donald Trump pursued it.
Well, whoever. We need to change guns. Because right now we don't have the right answer to anything. So, let's go here. What is this with drones? Well, if we're looking at Hamas, they have 200 drones in a fleet. If you're looking at Hezbollah, they have nearly 1,500. But you hear things like the drone guy that went across the White House gate, right? But I'm telling you, Hamas has nearly 1,500 in operation. That would scare me more than the little silly character that tried to go over the fence. Okay? So, how do they collaborate? Or do they collaborate? Well, the answer is, under an isolated condition, they don't collaborate. And the countermeasure here is to shoot it down, disable it, take it out in any way you can. Sometimes that's pretty expensive, by the way, and especially if you're in a civilian area. Using a missile in a civilian area tends to piss people off. And you get some collateral damage. A group is just an isolated group with no necessary chief, with a pre-programmed plan, meaning I'm going to attack this house. I'm going to send 4 or 5 of them to attack the house. Same type of thing. If I can shoot them down, I can track, I'm going to shoot them down, I got it. We get into a new type of thing, is teams. Now, this might be 50 or more in a team. The difference with teams is it's like the military. It's got a hierarchy, there's a chief, and each one has a section, but you can take out multiple targets. In the Skies project, they took out 6 targets at the same time. By the way, in Australia, New Zealand, and the United States at the same time. That's impressive, using satellite and IMSAR tech. The thing is, if you can get rid of the chief at the head of the snake, you got the team. You may not get all the targets, but you got the entire group under control. The last one is swarming. And swarming can be at any level, and you can track these guys. They don't have a chief. They come up on radar. But remember, these guys are starting from about a mile out from your target, just like the special ops guys. Okay? About a mile is a pretty fast response time. Now, when we were doing nuclear studies, it was never 10 seconds.
Well, 20 miles per hour.
The current nuclear study still says about 26 minutes before we wake up to realize there's a nuclear attack on either side. But technically, the pushing the button is 10 seconds. But the swarming here has a global strategic view. So if I shoot down 25 of them out of 100, so what? They're still coming. And think about it if it's a nuclear plant. But better yet, I like the attack that Wynn brought up that I haven't done yet, and I will, is I'm going to attack some of the old universities that I didn't like. Just think what we can do with, say, 40 drones coming in on, Harvard. I think I can show those assholes real quickly what they're worth. I went to Tulane. We were the heart of the South. Right. Okay. So there's some conventional thinking. This is the conventional. We'll get to the asymmetric in just a minute. Early detection or danger close. Applied appropriate countermeasures with the goal of restricting collateral damage. The latter one's tough. It's not that I can't hit the drone. I got lots of stuff to hit the drone with. Problem is, where am I shooting from? If I'm in Baghdad, this is a real big problem. If I'm in New York City, it's a bigger one. Some of our nuclear studies said that if we drop some nuclear material in the middle of New York City, I'm going to destroy the city. No, I'm not. I'm going to create a massive fear. It's not a massive destruction, well, the bomb, whatever the bomb does. But the radiation is massive fear because time, distance, and removal are the defenses against radiation. And most things, but it turns out what the ISIS guys are doing, they've got the medical, that's strontium 80, and let's see exactly. No, give me a second. Oh, here it is. This is, by the way, from one of the foremost experts on radiation. Let me make sure I get him. Professor of Physics, Radiation Safety Officer, Dickinson College, John Lutzenschwab. And what he says as potential sources, by the way, there's alpha, gamma, and beta. Alpha is nothing. Well, that's not nothing, but it's nothing. And in terms of penetration, beta is a little worse, but gamma is the one that's the dangerous one. And he basically says, fatal dose being 500 rem. By the way, where did they come up with that? How many, when I came to Pennsylvania, I found, when I was buying my house, the fellow asked me if I wanted to split the cost of radon. How many have heard of radon? Well, coming from Texas, there is no such thing as radon. Never heard of it before, so I thought it was a scam. So I let this character get away from me for $2,500. And then I found out from a newspaper article, that I was in a high section of radon. Well, radon's the level, according to the Environmental Protection Agency, which we all trust with our hearts, is 4. 4 is considered the federal level. And when they measured mine, it was 64. So I had to have radon remediation, which, by the way, is about $20,000 added to the cost of the house. But they did it to 4.2. So I called the state and said, you sent me a bummer. They didn't do their job. And they were forced to come back and drill 16 more holes in my ground. If you've had any of this happen, put up a huge thing that makes noise all night long, like a helicopter. But it's down to 0.4, and they paid for that. Mm-hmm. So you can use the federal government against themselves if you try. Anyway, I'm getting there. Plutonium, cesium, here we go. Medical facilities, cancer therapy, food irradiation, sterilization. Cesium-137 and cobalt-60, that's what it is. Unfortunately, that is 30 years to 5 years on half-lives. That's nasty stuff, and it's mostly gamma. So you're right, that's bad stuff. Okay. That's correct. There we go. So the question is, how do we stop these guys? What are the current conventional ways? And one is active radar, okay? And the other one is passive. The active is basically a estimation of distance, approach, speed, size, and penetration, and then taking it out with some weapon, missile, Nerf gun, whatever you like. The other way, though, is now looking at it from an IR, from radio waves. Passive communication, meaning I'm going to track you, but I don't necessarily have a way to deal with you. And unfortunately, that's what we've spent our money on. That's what we're spending our money on, the passive, all over we got lots of passive stuff. They have subnets that'll tell you where the Russians are going all the time, but that doesn't mean anything. That means, oh, they're coming, they're coming, they're coming. Oh, they're still coming, they're coming, they're coming. They've now sent off their missiles. Oh, they're coming, they're coming. Okay. And interestingly enough, some of the Hamas people have found ways to use countermeasures. Now, when I was working with this stuff, there were 3 levels. There was, first of all, electronic operations. Then there were countermeasures, or what was CM, and then we had CCM, which is no longer called that. It's called recovery. Those were the most secret things you could get, because that was what you would do once you knew you were being painted in an airplane. What would you do to recover? What would you do to send out a different kind of signal? Okay. So what are the goals here? Incapacitate, destroy the threat in a direct way. Another one is the efficiency of these things. These small UAVs come at you within 1 mile. That's the general rate level. 1 mile. That gives you a response time of less than 3 minutes on a general. It's coming at you at about 130 miles an hour, something on that order. Passive, protecting, physical protection, target decoys, shields, organized roadblocks, jamming, and so on. Down at the bottom here, you can see the aggressor countermeasures that we were talking about earlier. The current crop of small UAS are measured. There are lots of models. They have various levels of 4, 6, and 8 variants and so on. Fixed wing for basically for weather, not hard weather, but for agricultural. We do a lot of that out of Kansas. But you're interested in flight time, payload capacity, range, weather hardening or weatherproofing, imaging, and the programming ability. Those are your parameters. That's what you have control over. Isn't it interesting that all but weather, everything else, is the same parameter of SCADA? Isn't that interesting? So we're going to look at 4 of them. And again, I've got to get to a point where I can see this a little better. Didn't realize it was that difficult. The sense and avoid system has 5 groups: communications, critical control systems, intelligence, navigation, and payloads. And these are the A to D issues. They're not all covered in this particular one. But here are the groups we did take a look at, and we'll touch on them, and then I want to go into a discussion. Spoofing GPS. We've done this a lot. That's how the Iranians took down our RQ-170 back in 2011. That's how we took down 2 of theirs. Unfortunately, they sent ours back as a model, if you remember that story. Kind of insulting. Corrupting authentication of ground station. And the one that we work on now is chips. Where are all the chips in the ASICs? All right, field programmable chips and also application-specific integrated circuitry. Where are they all coming from? China. What's the problem with that? And guess what they did with it?
They put their own control software.
Does anybody remember the ELINT control over London? They took down an ELINT plane. Think about that for a minute. One of our electronic intelligence planes. That's scary. And how did they do that? They put it in the ASIC chip for the cryptographic communications. That's scarier. If they have control of our cryptography or can bypass our cryptography, what does that mean in a UAV? We own you. So another one is if you're in the plane and you're a pilot, you're interested in broadcast. One of the ways that you know where things are, remember these are very small generally, and out there where they're back in the back of the kitchen, you still can see them, but 1.5 miles away, a UAV is practically unseeable except for radar or electronic mode. So one of the things you can do is spoof or jam the broadcasting. The critical control systems are SCADA, and that's where we'll stop in this presentation. And we're down to about half of it, so I can get into the conversation. Other places we looked at are the intelligence area, navigation systems, where we spoof the navigation using weather. One of the most interesting things we came up with is because weather is completely unencrypted, comes in as a text contextual format. Who says I can't put something in I want to? That's exactly what we did. We told the UAVs that it was in the middle of a tornado. What is its response?
Land.
Well, it first goes to its flight path. There are two emergency waypoints. Generally, there are at least two that says, okay, if something goes wrong, you lose your signal or something like that, go here. And wait until it returns, until it recycles. If that, then it goes to the other one. If it doesn't work there either, then it says land. But what happens when I send it some bad weather data at the same time, control its SCADA system, which is critical control, and say, I want you to land on my pad? How does it know that's bad data? It doesn't. In fact, it's accepting the weather data as valid. It's coming from the U.S. government. Everything in the U.S. government, of course, is true. Payloads. And that was discussed by Hans very well. But basically, you're looking at things like spoofing, jamming, and malicious code. If we're talking about the critical control systems, what are they? Well, movement, landing, control of direction, detection, correction. Good. Then they have the 7 design parameters. How does it move? Detect, track, evaluate, prioritize, and so on. You've seen these before, I'm sure. Let me see if I can give you a picture rather than keep going on here. No, I can't. All right. I took all the pictures out to get this down to 25 when. Had all these nice little pictures. Let me go to a picture where I know I have one. There we go. This is the ground system. I can attack the air, the ground, the satellite, the UAV, the critical. Let me kind of give you an idea how dangerous the SCADA system attack is. I got in a little trouble if I hadn't been doing it with permission. I worked for the Defense Threat Reduction Agency at the time, so we were involved with lots of these checking, critical infrastructure. I came up with a SCADA attack on Hess Oil. Hess Oil has a huge set of oil refineries, several and so on, millions of gallons of capacity and such in their tanks. And being an engineer, I found a way to turn all the valves on, turn all the alarms off, and do this during the fog. Now, generally, the foreman shack is how far away from these plants, these silos? 2 miles, 3 miles, 4 miles. You can't really see what's going on. You're literally based on the trust of your SCADA system GUI, what it's telling you to do. The alarms are off. I've now turned out 8 million gallons of oil and 6 million gallons of gas and 3 million gallons of flammable VCM, vinyl chloride monomer, into the Chesapeake Bay. Approximately 16 million gallons in 8.5 hours. It destroyed the crab industry. It destroyed 850,000 jobs. The estimate was $6 billion of mistake, if you will, or $6 billion worth of payload destruction. It was a simulation, by the way. And I gave them that. They went black. They literally closed off the doors, took your telephone, and going black means that they can take your telephones and take your everything, all the pages and stuff, and we're going to go black, right? What's fascinating is that this convention center had about 600 people in it, and I thought they were all technical guys like us, or at least people interested, but not necessarily anybody in the food chain above, level. I was wrong. And I'm talking, and he says, continue. I had a colonel next to me, and he was my liaison. He says, go ahead. And it's completely dark. I can't see anybody. Suddenly, the damn wall started talking to me. And about this size, some guy says to me, what do you mean I got to shut down all the computers on our navigational systems and everything else on the goddamn submarine, says the wall. I said, yeah, if you want to protect yourself against SCADA attacks, it's exactly what you have to do. Are you sure? He yells. I said to the colonel, who the hell is this? He says, that's Admiral so-and-so. He's in charge of the submarine fleet. Yes, sir. I'd be more than happy to go over this in detail. Next, the wall came over here. And he gave me some kind of strange question. I can't remember what it was, but it was just this, very authoritative kind of guy. And I looked over and said, who's this guy? Assistant Secretary of Defense. I said, who are these walls? They're talking to me. Where are they coming from? Apparently, we were live everywhere. And so I've never talked to walls before, but it's a very, you go home, you need a drink after this. It's really a weird thing. Anyway, SCADA systems are quite interesting in terms of damage that's possible. Why? How many have a car? Gone. How many have a kitchen? How many do their wash in a laundry, right? Or in your own laundry? How many have a telephone or cell phone? How many have a computer? Am I getting there yet? Every one of these is controlled by a SCADA system. And they've been controlled for 7 decades. And guess what the security level is on SCADA systems? Well, it's not quite zero,
Close to.
but really, really small. Let's put it that way.
A lot of these are technically not SCADA systems. They're embedded systems, they're real-time systems, they're process controllers, but they're technically not SCADA.
Supervisory control and acquisition of data systems are the supervisor. So everything you named has a supervisor. And those systems are in fact SCADA systems. They may be very limited SCADA systems.
Not technical.
I call them a SCADA system because they act like a SCADA system. If it walks like a duck, sounds like a duck, it is a duck. But I agree there are some limited, you're talking about the limited sections underneath in real-time analysis, and I agree with you. At the same time, the overall system, if I can control
You're
the,
conflating remote terminal units and process control
Yes.
units and ladder logics and,
Yes.
and C language programs. You can't lump all that together. And from a security standpoint, there are at least 3 different areas there that have completely different security profiles.
sure. It's
So
a
lumping
problem,
it all together is not a good way to think about the security of this.
maybe.
I'll explain it to you after.
Well, I think that's not necessary, but I'd be more than happy to talk to you about it. Let's take a look at it the other side of the coin. If there's no security on any of those 3, what does it matter? If I have a dollar change in quarters or dimes,
So
it's still a dollar
Some
change.
degree of security on most of those. It's not
That's,
adequate security, it's not very good security.
Yes.
but it's some.
okay.
The difference is the age of the underlying system.
Yes, the older the worse.
Well, not
No,
necessarily.
no.
Well, the legacy systems tend to be the easier ones to attack.
Oh,
Many exceptions. For instance, a lot of the.
This is what I
older
love. This is good.
systems Are programmed in Ada, and they're now rewriting them and updating them and programming them in C++. And for those of you who know about buffer overflows and
Right,
data,
right.
you know about the difference between C family languages and Ada. This is like a terrible thing to do to industrial control systems.
And at
this
one
is
point, they were
happening
using
right
something
now
called
all
APL
across
too.
America on a large scale.
Yeah, at one time they were using APL, in fact, if you recall that one. Remember that before Ada? Yeah, it was a matrix form, if I remember right. But the point is, the vulnerabilities in the programming aren't what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the level of protection in a supervisory system that is designed for open communication. All of those systems are. That are designed to talk to each other. They're more interested in the GUIs, the graphical interface to the fella at the panel, if you will, in the foreman shack, who's controlling these things. That's what's interesting. He's not concerned about the internals. If I can turn off the alarms to him, if I can in just basic information security, if I can change the integrity and availability of the data, I've got him. And I don't care what the doggone hardware looks like or the software looks like. I don't even care what the theoretical side of it looks like. If I can change the data, which we do, if I can make the system do something that it's unexpected, if you will, from the operator's standpoint, I have them. And that's what I'm talking about. If I can insert data through the weather system, which is normally, remember, we don't have a pilot looking now. We have, at best, we have a ground system, looking at maybe a SAT system, one or two, the ground system. At best, I'm telling the UAV that it has weather data. It's coming from known weather, trusted sources. It comes in text. It's non-crypted, all right? It's picked up by the UAV as, oops, wait a minute, I'm going into a hurricane, even though there's no hurricane. So by definition, whatever the pre-programming in any language, I don't mean to yell at you, in any language, whether it's APL, C++, or COBOL, or Python, or anything else, it doesn't matter, because the system's going to react and say, I'm in the wrong place, I got to get out of here. And what is my emergency response? Go to a waypoint. Or some don't even have those. The smaller commercial ones have nothing in there. It basically says, and goes, dies. What you're really trying to do is take control of these guys. And to take control of them, like the Smart Skies project, is you want to have control of some particular parameter. The one we found that's the most easy right now is weather. The other one is GPS, of course, GPS spoofing and jamming. And there are lots of ways to get to that, but it's not the RTU that I'm looking at. It's not the CPU that I'm looking at. It's not the ASIC for hash number 3. It's not the any parts of the input or output system. All I'm doing is giving a phony, unauthenticated, cryptographically pure piece of data, which it assumes is true. And if it's true, it's going to work on it. We were talking about trust. Does that make, wait, does that make sense, my suggestion? Hold on. Just a minute. Does that make sense, what I said?
Yeah, it's true as far as it goes. The
Okay.
technical terminology you're using is incorrect, but your main point is valid.
We can agree to disagree on that one, but does the concept get across? Because in practice at the laboratory, that's what we do.
I think we're all aware of this concept already. I doubt there's anybody here who needs to pull that.
You've got an awful lot of clocks in there. Where's time in this equation?
Well, you've got, it depends on where it's coming from. If you're coming from a satellite, you've got latency.
Yeah. But you've also got standards to give you distance from measurement. So you can account.
Which measurement, I'm sorry, which measurement are you talking about? Oh, yeah, there is latency involved. If you're right next to it, the latency is very small.
Open a window, you can cope with it. But my point is, time must have a really strong value. Dennis is one of the gods of application security. Fundamentally, we're looking at something I think has been glossed over because a lot of the guys that did the time standards are not there anymore,
Okay.
and the youngsters haven't picked up the value. I'm aware of at least 3 times where to breach secure ID, GPS time was moved.
Okay.
And if you're a good secure ID administrator, time is fundamentally fixed. So my question for your systems there, what value is a good quality of time? I think it's a fundamental.
Oh, it is fundamental. In fact, my students have come up, and I haven't, my students have come up with everything from a 17-second latency factor all the way up to 2 minutes, depending upon where the source of this thing comes in. If I've got a satellite, if I'm going through a satellite and bouncing it back, I can have a very heavy latency. That's of real value to the attacker. That's a real value. If I'm right next to it and we're flying on the pad and maybe within a couple miles or something like that, or we're up to say 15, remember the level of some of these small ones only stay up there for 18 to 20 minutes. We're not talking about long-term kinds of evaluation. I would say a few seconds.
In Scott's space, economics, there are real-time examples of trading floors using that sort of latency.
Good, tell me about them. I'm
It's a really
interested.
important space. I think we have examples.
Do you, I'm sorry.
It gets down to really fine. We're not talking about seconds. We're talking about people who are using, who are buying microwave dish so they don't go up in the air at all to shave enough fractions of a second, enough milliseconds to get the trade.
So you're in the milliseconds at that point.
And that
Making
gives you
huge
a
amounts of
degree of
money
assurance.
at a millisecond level.
Okay.
It's quite extraordinary.
I agree. I haven't found that because we're in a much more gross or rough type
But are you? Because that's part of the equation. You've not made there's good value.
Our problem at first was bringing them down. We were trying to find the concept of how do we bring these things down at any level. Our second one is what were the primary risks? You know, where do I have the highest?
The timescales that you've heard me talk about are not relevant.
Well, we're talking about
They're way
trading
too
platforms.
fine-grained
Yeah.
for what.
But they're
These are
part of the
relative.
equation. But an autonomous
I know
device
already.
should have the capability to value its time source.
I couldn't agree more.
We have a whole family of attacks. If you look at that matrix that
You
we
need
just
to-
released that are all time source
You need to share.
corruptions, we figured out how to do havoc with messing with.
Also, you know, I think talking about is if you're setting valid data incorrect, but there are lots of it been effectively done.
Oh, yeah.
With
Well, there you're trying to explode the system. I'm actually trying to control it.
well,
I'm trying to get it down, I own it.
we can bring it down.
Yeah.
My
Well,
favorite.
but bringing it down to use it again or bring it down?
My favorite
Bring it down.
is attacking radar systems by sending code into the radar receiving antenna, which we're taking it in, thinking it's going to be a radar bounce back. And
That's
we
why-
can actually feed
Yeah, that's-
Melissa's code.
that's
And that's
cool.
why attack
Quite
vector
lovely.
matters, because the attack vector you're really talking about is a protocol violation.
Right.
Where you're using the protocol against itself. And it's just as important to factor in practical or, lower level concerns as well, because they can have the exact same effect as a protocol.
I couldn't agree more.
So we were talking about one where you drop the baud rate on a serial.
Okay.
So a space bar at 9600 bar would be
Okay.
interpreted as a brake control at 24.
Okay.
So if you can do that sort of thing in this scenario, you'll kill it every time.
I have to tell you, we have not looked like that. We've been more concerned, we've identified it, but that wasn't our prime.
I would just kind of argue that there's a different level of elegance
Yeah,
in sending specific data which is incorrect, which causes a correct interpretation,
Yep.
which leads to your desired output.
As
versus
opposed
theirs,
to-
right.
So, but you would need to know, for your, in the example of saying you're in a tornado, you would hopefully know what that would do, or you would just do it to see what it did.
Well, if it's an
Right.
aircraft, you'd add an anonymous, I'm saying the word someone, I can't. Who needs to do what?
Yeah, but I mean, right, so you've got the drone, if you know that that particular drone is programmed to do certain things at the tornado.
Well, we had, we had a lot of control over this. In fact, we said
And
so.
that's actually a key point, because the drone doesn't know it's in a tornado. The drone has a set of rules, and we
Right.
can look at those rules and we can
Yeah.
manipulate them. And actually thinking about things like tornadoes is really a distraction for a hacker. A hacker wants to bypass the concept that the thing was programmed to do and take advantage of what it was really, what the
Yeah,
code
yeah,
really
yeah.
says. And that's where it matters, really, the whole attack strategy, whether you're dealing with programmable logic controllers or RTUs or just what level of protocol you've got. Some of those give you very narrow operating range for mess with things. If you've got a ladder logic is beautiful from a security standpoint. And that's another example where replacing something that's from a security standpoint is beautiful with now so-called programmable logic controllers that you can write C code into. And they're bad from a security standpoint. We're going backward all over the place right now in control. At the very point at which the hacker world has made this its chief focus of interest. This is where the talent
Yeah.
in the hacker world has been going into the last few years.
I agree.
Nobody's been interested in botnets if they're a smart hacker in like years and years now. It's
Yeah.
all
Yeah.
different
I think
kinds of embedded
really-
systems.
It's like using malware programs that are based on one signature.
The word elegant. I think that some of the most practical attacks can be the most elegant as well as protocol attacks.
Okay.
Elegance is in the eye of the beholder. Ubiquity of attack, how easy it is, or where you have to be to accomplish one of these attacks, is usually the biggest driver, because the economy of the attacker is affected there. So that, I think, is a component of the elegance.
Our elegance was at a qualitative and a more high-level type of thing. We were looking to see if we could rate the risk levels. Which ones were worse than the next kind of thing? Which one had a bigger payoff? One of the presentations earlier talked about optimizing costs. We were trying to optimize risk in a sense, lower the risk. And then be able to make a taxonomy, what we found, and give that to FAA, who would ignore it, and give it to Homeland Security, who didn't ignore it.
So if CIA, our authority, I can put you in contact with them, do something sensible. We've done this for drones. We've brought ideas from last year. And it's value to say, well, this is how they're doing it over in the UK. That gives you value to fight the case. More than happy.
I wish I was a god in this, but I'm not. My job is to provide a valid set of studies with some limited resources, students who have to be trained, and we'll bring him down to help us with the SCADA systems. But you understand you have limited resources to do the job, and Kansas State is very limiting on its
Time,
resources.
The universal timestamp thing
That's correct.
has only come about as GMT because of work done in the civil aviation. It's still fundamental, it's always been. Not at all.
I couldn't agree with you more, but we weren't at that level of detail. That was taken into account, but assumed more than anything else, because we had the parameters we were looking at were different. And that doesn't mean that it's wrong. It means that's the next thing we have to look at.
Dennis is your man with his OWASP work.
Well, maybe he'll give us some money.
Can I ask a clarifying question about the model under which you did this study? Did
Sure.
you assume a white box or box attack software?
We assumed a black box. Basically, we assumed a black box.
I guess.
Plus we had control over what we were putting in each one. We had an aerodrome, we had a Cessna 168 and so on. We knew what we were doing, and we had control over as much as we could control But they're all within a limited range of the field, and the field is what, 5 miles? That's not across country, that's not taking satellite data and so on. Yeah.
Another thing, had an assumption that for operation, under swarm attack.
Oh, yeah, you don't care about that at all,
Right out
no.
of the air, I mean, you want to
Yeah.
write it up.
Our job was to see whether we control it, take it back, and in theory, then we had control of it and do with it what we wanted to
Is
do.
that because of current law that you have that
No,
requirement?
no, that
or
was
what?
just our design methodology. There was no instruction to do this. Nobody said you can't do it. We had permission from from the airport and permission from the FAA. We have a license. You gotta go through all kinds of licenses to get this stuff. But nobody said you must do it this way. No. They were more concerned with, here was how it started off. We have a budget of X amount of money, which is classified, but X amount of money, and we need to know if a drone attack hits a particular national critical infrastructure, and we had 7 of them they gave us out of the 14 that they were concerned with. One of them was navigational, another 2 you can figure out which ones they are. They're not that typical. What would be the top 12, 15 attacks based on a drone system that we should concern ourselves, and in what ranking, even though we had no data other than qualitative, not quantitative, there's no quantitative per se data that we could develop fast enough to give them, but qualitative, you can do a delta approach, you can take a look at it, there are lots of ways to get to qualitative if you see the risk improves with a particular threat, then you have something. You have a qualitative one, basically much more difficult than low, medium, high, but that kind of thinking. And so the answer was, give me a taxonomy and a list. That was the project. And so there were limited things that we could do. There's a lot of things I'd like to do. And I'm adding, the time went in the back of my head right now, and I'm expanding it to EDU, and I'm expanding it to a whole bunch of other things that I've heard here today. But, got it. So my problem is I have funds and students who are going to graduate, which means that we have to go through the whole process of studying. They're not 100%. You understand? If I get short terms, generally I have them in a master's for 5 courses. That's what I got. And so I have to work within that time frame. I don't have, and I'm not paying them much either. You understand? They're getting a grade that basically, they're quite good. And they're as sharp as can be, but at the same time, we have our limitations. So,
I have a quick question.
good, go ahead, I'm on my last minutes here.
Like the new drones that are coming out that you the development top is
Right.
I think that's gonna
No, because the swarm is a group of a lot,
right, but
without a chief, so they're basically 50 of those.
right, but
They don't care.
So, but if you're damaging them,
So let's damage 50 of them out of 100. Let's damage 50 of them.
right,
50% is a big hit. You got 50 that are going to go on target, and nothing's going to stop them unless you have the global view of where they're coming. You know they're coming at you because you can see them on radar. They're radar active. But at the same time, unless you have a particular global defense that can change and get them all, which you've got 50 of them,
right.
then what happens to the other 50? They don't have any minds. They do the thing. So I don't think so.
You could be making it. Going back to that Russian container, we've currently got projects used for our Navy.
Oh, sure.
The capability to manufacture these, you just throw them away. They're making 5,000 or 10,000 beyond the realm.
Well, we saw some there with what they call them, the nano robots. I mean, how much does it cost to make those things?
You might be able to make a couple of dollars each.
But the problem is the payload. How much payload can you put in that other than a camera?
If it's something that's going to interfere with radar,
Like Shaft?
it's got- exactly so. Then who's to say what the purpose or mission might be?
Gotcha,
If you
I agree.
look from the air,
Yeah.
because that's where you'll go.
I agree.
Payload insertions for troops are currently 20, 30 miles.
Right.
So you can drop them from another country.
Okay.
So that's clearly what you've got to plan for. And then you could be looking at insertion over the stratosphere